Good afternoon, this is Professor Shannon Gracie. Today we'll be covering section 6.3 in the combo book by Robert Blitzer, Introductory and Intermediate Algebra for College Students. My name is Professor Shannon Gracie, and here we go. When you're done with your homework today, you should be able to factor trinomials by trial and error. By the way, I still highly recommend factoring by grouping instead. And we'll be factoring trinomials by grouping. So, more of the same, just a couple of other, new techniques. So let's warm up by factoring these problems here. So we've got, actually, I need to get you to do the work. So pause the movie and warm up by factoring these 4 items. On your mark, get set, go! All right, let's see how you did. Here's the first one. Actually, I'll just go underneath these guys. So this will be equivalent to the smallest power of x I see is x, and the smallest power of y I see is y. So that's my greatest common factor. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at what remains. So x times x, good, is equal to x squared. And you see you have that whole first term now, x squared y. And then minus, we don't need the x, it's represented already, but we do need one factor of y. So here we go. That one was not so bad. All right. Part B. If you were to go ahead and make your x, you've got an overall product of negative 51. And so remember that when you have a negative here, it means you have opposing signs to get that product. So this negative 14 is a result of a difference when combining like terms. So therefore, let's think about different factors. If we were to factor 51, and I guess I'll do that right underneath it. So if you factor 51, I'll worry about the negative later. 3 divides 51. So 51 actually factors as 17 times 3, and the difference of 17 and 3 is 14. So now we just need to decide which one should be negative. We ended up with a negative sign here, so the larger number needs to have the negative in front of it. So I'll put it like this. And then factoring by grouping, we have x squared minus 17x plus 3x minus 51. So this is how we split the negative 14x. And again, your friends, red group and blue group. So I can factor out of the red group, I can factor out an x, and I'm left with x minus 17. And if I factor out a positive 3, I get x minus 17 remaining from the blue group. Now notice we have a common binomial factor of x minus 17. So at the end of the day, when we factor out x minus 17, we're left with the binomial x plus 3. And this was our common binomial. How'd we do on that one? Are they getting a little bit easier? Good. All right, so now going up to part C. Okay, first thing I see here is that I've got 3 even numbers as we go through the terms. Second thing I see is they all have x's. So do you see we can factor out 2x, and then we'll be left with x squared minus 3x plus 2. Now don't get too excited because I believe we'll be able to factor that trinomial. So what we're looking for is an overall product of 2 times 1, which is 2. And then again, notice that I have a positive here, so that means I either have two positives or two negatives for my middle terms. Well, there's a negative here, so there's got to be two negatives. When I add two negatives, I need to get -3. So the numbers that work will be -2 and -1. All right. So keeping it all lined up, I've got my 2x. I'll rewrite the -3x as -2x minus 1x. And then the +2 hangs out. So this is how I split the -3x. And then again we have our red group and we have our blue group. So now we have 2x. I can factor out an x from the red group and I'm left with x minus 2. And if I factor out, let's see, a -1 from the blue group, again this is a wee bit tricky, I'll get an x minus 2. Remember, we would like to have the same binomial factor so that or a common binomial factor so we can factor it out. So notice that x minus 2 is our common binomial factor, and we'll get 2x, here's the x minus 2, and then we are left with the x minus 1. So x minus 2 is the common binomial factor. So that one, had a few layers to it. It had a greatest common factor of all the terms, and then we were able to factor the trinomial. Okay, so here we go. Here's some z's for us. All right. Making our x, we have an overall product of -72. Since we have a negative here, that means a negative product means that you have opposing terms when you're combining like terms. So the difference is going to be a +1. So what two numbers have a product of -72 and end up being +1 when you combine like terms? Good, -8 and +9. So here we are, we get z squared minus 8z plus 9z minus 72. So I broke up the 1z like so, and then we have our red group and our blue group. And so we can factor out a z from the red group and we're left with z minus 8. And we can factor out a +9 from the blue group and we're left with z minus 8. Here's my red group and my blue group. Now we have a common binomial factor of z minus 8 that we can take out of there. And we're left with z plus 9. So don't get nervous if there's different variables. I know sometimes people have an issue if there's different variables. All right, so now that we're all warmed up, let's go ahead and look at a strategy for factoring. Now here we go. The difference between this section and the last is that the a that you see in front of here is not always going to be 1 like in the last section. So assume for the moment that there is no greatest common factor other than 1. So that means, these steps apply when you've already factored out the greatest common factor or if there is none. So here we go. Find. Now, this is trial and error, and I got to tell you, I'm going to show you how to do it because that's my job. I do not recommend trial and error. I recommend factoring by grouping until you have had enough experience with factoring that it's starting to feel easy for you. Then you can kind of segue to the trial and error. All right? In fact, on the exam, there will be 2 items that specifically require you to use trial and error. So, trial and error has you find 2 first terms. So this is kind of going off that FOIL business, whose product is a times x squared. And then you need to find two last terms whose product is C. Let me make that better. Then, by trial and error, perform steps 1 and 2 until the sum of the outside product and the inside product is B times X. If no such combinations exist, the polynomial is prime. Okay, so here we go. Factor using trial and error. So, ax squared is the 5x squared they were talking about, and c is the 8, positive 8. So for trial and error, basically what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I know that I'm going to have two binomials being multiplied. Now, you're kind of lucky in this case because the 5 is prime, so the only way to get 5x squared, is to do, 5x times x. Can you kind of visualize that would give you 5x squared? Now, 8, and here's the problem. 8 can be made by, 1 times 8, 8 times 1, 2 times 4, or 4 times 2. And you just have to kind of keep going until you hit on the right combination. Now, again, you use the same reasoning. I have a positive here, which means the middle term is the result of either two negatives being added or two positives being added. The sign on it is a minus, so the 14x is the result of adding two negatives. Okay? So, here we go. Here's the trial and error part, right? So if we do 1 times 8, right? So 1 times 8. So then you kind of check it out, right? And then we said they were both going to be minuses. So you get the positive 8 and you get the 5x squared, but you see that 5x times negative 8 is negative 40x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. So you would end up getting negative 41x for your middle term. So crap, that doesn't work. All right, so now let's try again 5x and x. And now you could try 8 times 1, right? So if I do my minus 8 and my minus 1, again, you get the outer terms, but you would have negative 5x minus 8x, which is negative 13x. So you're getting close, but again, it's not happening. Okay, here we go. 5x and x. So now we can try 2 and 4. So again, you get a negative 2x and a negative 20x, which will give you negative 22x. So you get your outer terms but not your inner term. So this one better work or else it's going to end up being prime. So here we go. The only other option we have is minus 4 and minus 2. So here, do you see you'll get negative 10x minus 4x. Finally, we get it. Oh, actually, I should have done that in green, huh? Minus 4 minus 2. So finally, yay, we get it. But do you see how much work we had to do? So it's up to you. If I don't see any work when I'm grading your exam, I can't possibly award partial credit. You know, so I really recommend that you use factoring by grouping to do these. So with that in mind, you go ahead and pause the movie. Well, no, you know, I'm going to show you how to do. Well, I guess I'll show you these examples using trial and error, and then I hope you're not sad, but I probably won't ever use it again. So pause the movie and try to do B, C, and D. See how you do, and then we will go from there. Okay, so let's see how part B went. So here we go. In this case, we have another prime, which is good, but the prime in this case is the 7. So we know we're going to have a situation where we've got to use 1 times 7 or 7 times 1. So the tricky part is going to be the 6x squared, because just like last time, 1 times 6, 6 times 1, 2 times 3, and 3 times 2 are all possibilities for the coefficient to the x squared. And just to make things exciting, we've got a minus here, all right? So we're going to have opposing signs, and we're not sure what it goes with yet, all right? So, so this positive 19 is the result of a difference, since we'll have opposing signs. So let's go ahead and get started. If we were to use the 1 and 1x, actually I'll just put x. So the x and then the 6x, do you see that gets you your 6x squared? All right, then what we need is a middle term of 19x, right? So do you see that's just not going to happen? I'm not even going to put any signs, because 6x and 7x are going to have a difference of either 1 or -1. So this is not going to work. Okay, going down the list. So I'll keep the 1 and the 7 fixed. And then we will have, we'll try the 6x and then the 1x and see if that works. So this is the 6 times 1 situation. So then, do you see we would get 42x and a 1x. So the difference between them will be plus or minus 41x. So that one's not working. Okay, next up, we will have, let's try the 2 and 3. So 2x and 3x. So now we've got our 6x squared. Then we have a 14. We have 14x from the 2x times 7 and 3x from the 1 times 3x. So 14 and 3 are going to have a difference depending on the sign placement of plus or minus 11x. So that's not going to work. So we're down to our last option. And keep your fingers crossed. So now we need to put in the 3x and then the 2x. So 3x times 7 is 21x. And then we have a 2x. So that's going to work because the difference will be plus or minus 19x. So we need the positive sign to go in front of that larger product, 21x, and the minus sign to go in front of that inner product, so that we end up with a positive for the middle term. So we are done. So trial and error, I mean, it's not that bad as long as there's not too many combinations that you can pick for the factors, the different ways to multiply. Okay, so here we are on our next examples. So we've got 3x squared, so 3 is prime, so we'll go ahead and we'll leave that fixed. Now, the 4y squared, notice that you can get 4 by 1 times 4. I'm just looking at the coefficients. You can get it as 4 times 1, or you can get it as 2 times 2. So now it's just trial and error to see what combination. I've got a plus here, so when I combine like terms, it'll be a sum of 2 negatives because of this minus sign. So here we go. If I do the 1 and the 4, I'll have a 3x, I'll have a 1x in the inner, and I'll have a 12x. Oh, and you know what? We lucked out. That works out, do you see? Because we'd have negative 12x minus x is negative 13xy, but what's missing here? Should it have just been 1 and 4, or should it have been... Good, I needed to have, instead of just 1 and 4, I needed to have y and 4y. And there we have it. So let's just double check everything. Negative 12xy for the outer product. The inner product is negative y times x, which is negative x times y. And when you combine them, you get the middle term. So that was nice. We got that one pretty quickly. And then this last one, okay, here the prime number is the 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1 and 2 and have that fixed. Now, the coefficient in front of the z is 9, so you can get that as 1 times 9, 9 times 1, or 3 times 3. So if I do 1z times 9z, let's see what I get. So here it's all positive, so I would need to get a positive 3z when I did that. So let's see what happens. So 9z squared, so that was fine. 2z plus 9z is 11z. So this doesn't work. And notice that they're all positives, so these would be positives, but it didn't work out. And then, here we go. And then we said there it's all positive. So now we could try 9z and 1z. Again, do you see that I'll get like 19z on this one. So that won't work because I need 3z. Alrighty. So now we have there's only one more possibility. If I do the 3z and 3z, I get 9z squared, which I needed. I get a 6z and a 3z, which is 9z. So nothing works. I tried all the possibilities. None of them work. So this is prime. All right? Okay, here is the method that I highly recommend. So I did my job. I showed you that other way of doing things. If you have a coefficient other than 1, I highly recommend the factoring using grouping. So we've already learned this, but let me just remind you, the leading coefficient and the constant are the a times c. And before we were always getting 1 times something, but now the a's are going to change. Then what we do is we find the factors of a times c, whose sum is b. And again, this is when you combine like terms. Combine like terms. So when you combine like terms, you get, when you combine like terms, you get b, or if you want, you could say bx. All right, so rewrite the middle term, bx, as a sum or a difference using the factors you found from step 2, and then factor by grouping. Okay. Here we go. Here's our x for the first one. Okay. 3 is A. Negative 10 is C. So we get negative 30. So the negative 30 came from the 3 times the negative 10 is negative 30. Okay? And then we've got negative 1 here. Notice we have a minus sign here, which means we have opposite signs, right? So the negative 1 is the result of a difference when you're combining like terms. So here we go. We have, I believe that negative 6 and positive 5 fit the bill. We get negative 30 for their product, negative 1 for their sum or difference. So then, here we go. Rewrite this as 3x squared minus 6x plus 5x minus 10. So we rewrote minus x as negative 6x plus 5x. And now we go back to our factoring by grouping skills. And we can factor out a 3x from the red group, and we're left with x minus 2. And if we factor out a 5 from the blue group, we're left with x minus 2. And we have a common binomial factor of x minus 2. We factor that out, and then we're left with 3x plus 5. Isn't that easier than getting all frustrated using trial and error? Okay, so that's pretty much the long and short of it. So what I'd like you to do is pause the movie and try doing, I think I have a B, C, and D. And then we've got, if you're really into it, you can go on to example 4 and then just make sure and check your work when you're done. Okay? Good luck. Okay, let's see how you did. In the x, we have 8 times positive 3 gives us positive 24. And that's how we got that. And then a positive here means that we need to, this negative 10 came from adding two negatives. So, what two numbers have a product of positive 24 and a sum of negative 10? Awesome. Negative 6 and negative 4 fit the bill. So here we go. We'll get 8x squared minus 6x minus 4x plus 3. And then, factoring by grouping, again, we've got our red group and our blue group. We can factor out, I think, a 2x from the red group, and we're left with 4x minus 3. And then if we factor out a negative 1 from the blue group, we're left with 4x minus 3. So that one was a little bit tricky. And then notice we have a common binomial factor of 4x minus 3. So when we factor that out, we'll get 4x minus 3 times 2x minus 1. How we doing? You doing okay? Awesome. A common mistake I see is people forget they just put the C at the top of the X, not the A times the C. Right? Okay. So for part C in the X, we have 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. And then we have a positive 5. So we are looking for two numbers that have a product of negative 36 and a difference of positive 5 because of that minus. So what fits the bill? Good. It'll be negative 4 and positive 9. So then we will get 9y squared minus 4y plus 9y minus 4. So we split our middle term into these two. And then here's our red group and our blue group. So we can factor out a y from our red group and we'll get 9y minus 4. And you see we can only factor out a 1 from the blue group and we'll get 9y minus 4. And then we have a common binomial factor of 9y minus 4. So when we factor that out, we're going to get 9y minus 4 times y plus 1. How you guys doing? You doing okay? Great. It gets easier as time goes on, I promise. Okay, so our x for part D will be 12 times negative 12 is negative 144. And then we have a positive 7. Be careful, there's the xy is the middle term. So I got to keep an eye out for that. Now this minus this negative product means we're going to have opposing terms. So we're looking for something that's got a product of negative 144 and a difference of positive 7. So what do you think? 16 and 9 I think will fit the bill, you'll find. And let's see, the 9's got to be negative and the 16 positive. So here we are. We will get 12x squared minus 9xy plus 16xy minus 12y squared. We split our 7xy into these two terms here. And then here's our blue group and our red group. So from the red group, we can factor out a 3x. And we're left with, I think, 4x minus 3y. How does that look? Yep. And then from the blue group, we're going to be able to factor out a 4y. And then we're left with 4x minus 3y. So here's our red group and our blue group. And then our common binomial factor is the 4x minus the 3y. So when we factor that out, we're left with 3x plus 4y. So this is what we factored out. And we're all done. How'd you do? Okay? Great. All right, so next up, we need to factor completely, and really everything needs to be factored completely. If you haven't already paused the movie to try these 4 examples, I recommend that you do so. And then we'll check back with me and we'll work them out together. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, let's see what's happening with part A. I'm seeing that I have all even numbers, so I can certainly factor out a 2. And then, now we need to make our x and see if we can factor the trinomial. Overall product of negative 10 for the coefficients. That's from the 2 times negative 5. And then a difference of negative 9 because of the negative product. And the negative sign there means we'll have opposing terms, and they need to end up being negative 9. So the numbers that fit the bill are, I believe, negative 10 and positive 1. So don't forget to keep the 2 hanging around for the ride. Otherwise, it's very easy to forget to put it back at the end. So I split that middle term like so, and then factoring by grouping, we will have this 2 is hanging out. I can factor out a 2x from the red group, and I'll be left with x minus 5. Factor out a 1 from the blue group, and I'm left with x minus 5. And we have a common binomial factor of x minus 5. So at the end of the day, we will get 2 times x minus 5 times 2x plus 1. And x minus 5 was that common binomial factor. Okay. Part B. So I'm looking at all the terms. The constants do not have a common factor, but I can factor out an x. And I'm left with 3x squared plus 14x plus 8. Now I need to make my x. I've got an overall product of positive 24. That comes from the 3 and the positive 8. The middle term is going to end up being the sum of 2 positives. That needs to be a positive 14. So 2 numbers that fit the bill. Good. Positive 12 and positive 2. So we'll get x times 3x squared plus 12x plus 2x plus 8. And then we split the 14x like so. And then factoring by grouping, we have x times, I can factor out a 3x from the red group, and I'm left with x plus 4. And then if I factor out a positive 2 from the blue group, then I'm left with x plus 4. So here was my red group and blue group result. And my common binomial factor is the x plus 4. So I will get x times x plus 4, and what remains is 3x plus 2. This is what was factored out, the x plus 4. Great. All right, 2 more. And then you can go and do a bazillion more on your homework. All right, so now I'm looking at part C, and I see that I can factor out a 2y squared, I believe. And I'm left with 12y squared plus 5y minus 2. So when I make my x, I have an overall product of negative 24. So since that's a negative product, it's going to be a difference of positive 5 after combining like terms. So this here was how we got the negative 24. So which two numbers fit the bill? Which two numbers fit the bill? I believe nope, it'll be negative 3 and positive 2, right? Negative 3 and positive 8, rather. Let's see. That gives us negative 24 product and positive 5 after combining like terms. So here we go. 2y squared times 12y squared minus 3y plus 8y minus 2. So we split the 5y with the negative 3y and the positive 8y. Then we'll get 2y squared. And then here's my red group and my blue group. So we'll have, let's see, we can certainly factor out a 3y from the red group, and we'll get 4y minus 1. And if we factor out a 2 from the blue group, we'll get 4y minus 1. So that looks good. So here was our red group and our blue group. And we have a common binomial factor of 4y minus 1. So our end result will be 2y squared times quantity 4 minus 1 times quantity 3y plus 2. And this was the common binomial factor. Okay, so here is our last example of the day. So here we are. Notice there's a y plus 1 we can factor out, and it looks to me like we could also factor out a 3. So 3, remember to put y plus 1 in parentheses, and then we'll be left with 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. Alright, so now I'm going to see if that binomial can be factored. So the overall product is positive 10. Whoops. And then it would be, we need a sum of 11. A sum of 11, two positives. Because of that plus sign here, that positive product. And this plus sign means that it's pluses all around. Good times. So it looks to me like positive 10 and positive 1 fit the bill. So here we go. We'll have 3 times quantity y plus 1. And then we've got 2x squared plus 10x plus 1x plus 5. By the way, this is how we split the 11x. And this is how we had gotten that product of 10, just in case you got lost along the way. So here is our red group and our green group. And so we've got the 3 times quantity y plus 1 going along for the ride. I can factor out a 2x from the red group, and I'm left with x plus 5. And if I factor out a 1 from the blue group, I'll get x plus 5 remaining. So here was my red group, and here was my blue group. And notice that we have a common binomial factor of x plus 5. So we get 3 times y plus 1. Now, working on the brackets, square brackets there, factor out our x plus 5, and then we're left with 2x plus 1. And we're all done. Yay! Now you can go have a margarita after you do your homework. All right, have a wonderful day, and you'll be hearing me soon, I am sure.